Hello, I'm Peter Towers. Welcome to the Accountant's Minute podcast, where we're going to be looking at how to sell advisory services with confidence. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Selling services is difficult at the best of times. But when it's selling professional services that you've been involved in the preparation of, the visualization of, can be very difficult. But it's a process that accountants, bookkeepers, in fact, all professions, need to seriously look at. Because every process requires a sale. In the webinar we presented for Accountant's Minute this week, I was joined by Trevor Marchant, a master salesman, a man who has spent most of his professional career as a sales trainer. And he indicated that there were basically two processes in businesses. One was the preparation of the product or service or whatever it was that was going to be a means of generating income for a business. And the second part then is the actual sale of that product, that service, that undertaking. Please think about it. How do you then go about making that sale? So gearing up to sell advisory services is very important. But before we go too far down in analysing how you might sell professional services, I think there's a very important need to get everything sorted out within your firm to make sure that everything is being properly documented and identified. Intuit QuickBooks recently conducted a survey, which was the SMB Navigator Report for 2025, which was prepared for SMEs and their accountants and bookkeepers. And they asked 500 businesses to identify how they viewed the services provided to them by their professional advisor. The highest level was for a key strategic partner, which they defined as they are a key partner in our business and our go-to professional for advice, and they are extremely valuable to our business's growth and success. I think that's a rating that we'd all be very happy to receive, wouldn't we? The other two ratings that they listed were valued relationship. And in that, they defined it as being, we have a good relationship with them, meaning accountants or bookkeepers, and they helped us to achieve our financial or compliance commitments. But, this is the punchline, but they aren't necessarily our go-to advisor. I wondered who their go-to advisor was. Is it their mate at the pub because they get better advice from him or her than what they get from their accountant or their bookkeeper? That's not a very good thought to have, is it? And then we got the third, transactional relationship. We have a limited relationship with them. This is an SME commenting on services provided by accountants and bookkeepers. We have a limited relationship with them, and they are a service provider who provides a straightforward services and not much further. and not much further. I wouldn't be very happy to receive either of these last two endorsements from a client. They aren't necessarily our go-to advisor, or they're not much use to go much further. So let's look at how the 500 businesses that were surveyed by QuickBooks identified. And this is disastrous. The key strategic partner category was only awarded by 15% or 75 of the 500 SMEs. 15%. The valued relationship by 51%. And the transactional relationship, 34%. That means that 85% of those firms didn't rate their accountants very highly at all. I think this is a very poor response for Australian accountants, because 85% were saying that their accountant was not a key partner in their business, was not their go-to professional for advice, was not classified as being extremely valuable to the SME's business growth and success. As a profession, we have to do better than this. And I'd be very disappointed if that was the sort of rating that ESS BIZTOOLS subscribers got. And I intend to follow through on that and ask our subscribers to conduct a survey of their clients using those same three definitions and analysing what the clients believe the performance has been. So this is the first thing that I think you need to be looking at if you're going to be offering advisory services to your clients. Because if the recipients of these services do not rate those services higher, and by higher I think 80% should be rating your services at the key strategic partner level, I think you need to be tidying up internally in your team training to make sure that your team are delivering a higher level of services before you undertake any more sales campaigns. So the business advisory services package developed by ESS BIZTOOLS is where you start, as far as we are concerned, if you agree to become a member of ESS BIZTOOLS, because it contains 13 modules which guide your team through the processes that are going to be needed for them to have an appreciation of the difference between being the tax return preparer for a client and now offering a wider range of advisory services that are going to be offered on a weekly, monthly basis, perhaps sometimes daily, but in the main daily, setting up the systems and having someone within the client's firm attend to them. In other words, we envisage that you are going to perform the in-house accountant or chief financial officer service. Pick which terminology you are happy with and comfortable with. But you are going to utilize today's technology, today's communication, the software, AI, and everything else to be able to give your client real services to assist them. And this requires a different skill set, because when you just prepare a tax return and an annual set of accounts, I don't think you really understand your client. And I found that out personally. After I qualified, I spent a couple of years in a chartered accountancy firm. And then I decided I needed to understand more about accounting, so I joined a public company as one of their regional accountants. There were 13 other regional accountants in that organisation. But within a few years, I had some lucky breaks and I was promoted to be the company secretary and chief financial officer. And in that role, I found that I knew a lot more about that public company. It had been a public company for 50 years, but I had to understand where everything was, who owned what, where the title deeds were, who had authority to undertake various activities. What was the internal control system like? Did I need to make some improvements? How was I reporting to the chief executive officer? Did I have the system right? Was I controlling what was coming in from the branch offices or over the eastern side of Australia? That was important. So I think you need to be thinking through, and within ESS BizTools, we have this concept that the first thing you need to do after the training program of your team members is to really understand the client, to undertake a complete due diligence review so that you know your client 1 inch wide but 1 mile deep. Their internal control, their policies on a whole range of activities, who's got authority to commit, who signs off on various activities, what are the skills of the leadership team? Do they need more mentoring and training? Can they read the financial reports that you're preparing for them? Could you change the terminology that you're using to suit their understanding of various things? And that's very appropriate in some of the daily reports in a business, because I found that very important people in the organisation that I was involved in were the foremen. They needed to get data. And I asked them one day whether they were happy with the data they were receiving. And they said, what data? I said, well, this form. And I showed them one of our daily forms. And they said, oh, we don't understand that. We don't know what that means. We don't even look at it. What a waste of effort. There was an accountant in the organisation preparing that and sending it to them. And they told me that no one had ever asked them before whether they understood it. So this is the need to dig down and clearly understand what's going on in the organisation. So we need to make sure there's been training given to your team, and then they can work through the processes. They understand the use of the SME needs analysis, which we have as a vital component of our system. It's some suggested matters that you might discuss with your client. Because one of the challenges accountants have got in providing advisory services to SMEs is that many SMEs do not understand that accountants in public practice can give them advice on day-to-day business matters, debtors' days outstanding, organising a debtor system, helping them with a research and development claim, helping them to project their future with predictive accounting reports, budgets, cash flow forecasts, projected balance sheets. You can advise them on corporate governance issues. You can help them prepare themselves to be able to raise capital utilising crowdsourced funding, equity raising, or early stage innovation company capital raising processes. There's a whole range of commercial activities. So at ESS BizTools, we say that we are offering you services to assist you to deliver an outstanding range of financial, commercial, management accounting, advisory services to your SME clients, not just restricted to taxation. Taxation is important, of course. We don't want our clients to get into trouble with the tax office. but it doesn't help them run their businesses because there's too big a delay. They're not receiving daily, monthly, weekly information, which is vital to running a business. Not just waiting to the end of the year when you receive an annual set of accounts with a tax return, which might be many months after the end of the financial year. But what's happened during the year? Has there been analysis of the key performance indicators or the business metrics? Has there been comparisons back to the budget and variations prepared? Has there been some, let's have a look at what's likely to happen in the next few months because we've had to increase the inventory levels because we're importing products from overseas, and with the wars going on and shipping routes being changed, we're going to hold more stock in Australia. But what's that going to do to the cash flow? Probably going to blow it out a bit. And is the business going to be able to fund that, or do we need to go off and talk to the bank, or should we be looking at trying to raise some capital? There's a whole range of issues that can come. And your client wants to have someone they can talk to. I used to call them the what-if questions that I would get from my CEO virtually every day, and sometimes from very early in the morning. He was a very early riser and used to catch aeroplanes that were flying out at 6 a.m, so he was up bright and early. And he'd have an idea. Hi, Pete, can you have a look at this? I'll be in Sydney or I'll be in Melbourne in a couple of hours' time. Can you have a briefing for me on that? Because I want to discuss it with the person I'm meeting with. Who does your client ask those questions to? Your SME client. No one will ever convince me that SME clients don't have very similar problems to CEOs of public companies. But let's just analyse the difference. In the company that I was with, I was the company secretary and chief financial officer, and there were 11 others in the leadership team, experts in their fields: engineering, sales, marketing, production, construction activities, livestock. We were in the meat processing industry. Yeah, so livestock was very important for us. Experts. That our CEO had the benefit of having those 12 people and 13 area managers who were also very competent and understood their business, feeding into him. Who does your SME client have giving them advice on a day-to-day basis, especially the financial area? I noticed that in my role, I don't think it was just to do with my company, that if something couldn't be sent to anyone else, it was seemed to hit my desk. Now, maybe that was because I was also the company secretary. So who does your client turn to? They've woken up at 3 a.m. and they've had a brainwave, and they didn't actually pick up the phone and ring you then, although my CEO did that a couple of times. But who do they ring at 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. and say, gee, I thought of this last night, or we hadn't thought of this when we planned something? So ESS BIZTOOLS has developed some selling aids to assist you on this process. We produce a newsletter each month. It's got 4 to 6 articles targeted to small businesses. The idea is you send it round to them and they can look at it, and you should be following them up so that you can get some feedback from them. And perhaps this is going to open up a new service that you can supply to those clients. So this is the preparing your firm so that you have got a different outlook when it comes to supplying advisory services. So how are you going to sell these services? We were lucky to have the services of Trevor Marchant, who talked to us in our webinar presentation. Trevor was originally a Westpac sales training manager. Did you know banks had sales training managers? I've always found that quite interesting. And if banks needed sales training managers, I think accountants might also. So Trevor asked some very interesting questions in his presentation. And he indicated that he had a free booklet available, How to Sell Advisory Services, which you can contact him, and I'll give you his contact details a little bit later. Trevor talked about the dominant buying motive. What is the service that your clients are looking for? The reason I gave you the preamble I've just given you is that I need you to be ready to deliver these services. We don't want to have a sales build-up and then find that you're not able to offer the products. You wouldn't advise your retail clients to do that, to go out and have a massive sales campaign and then they realise the stock hasn't turned up for them to be able to sell. In our case, the stock is the ability to deliver advisory services to your clients. So you need to make sure that you've got that ready first. And it's very important that accountants are able to differentiate our services. There are members of our profession who are quite happy to continue on being very reliant on taxation returns. And if that's your viewpoint, well, I don't know if you're going to receive much inspiration from my comments. If, however, you're keen to expand your services to ultimately end up with, say, a 50-50 split between taxation advice and advisory services. I spoke to a young accountant a couple of weeks ago, and he had a 70% of his fee income was coming from advisory services and only 30% from other, which included taxation. So what's your purpose in trying to sell? Was one of the questions that Trevor Marchant was putting. He said we have to help people to be able to sell their products. And he made the comments that I did say a little bit earlier, that in every business, whether it's a professional accounting firm, a medical practice, a retail store, everyone needs products or services that are going to generate revenue. And then that product or service needs to be sold. Trevor Marchant said that unfortunately many accountants are hesitant at the sales process. Trevor has a very interesting product package called the Boss Factor Library, which is about 100 separate articles, books, talking about a whole range of business matters that could help you have a better understanding of selling of advisory services. And one of Trevor's key comments, and I've heard it from him for many years, I've known Trevor Marchant for 25 years, and he said it on the first day I met him, and I think every time I've ever spoken to him since or heard him made a presentation. And that is that advisory services are sold, not bought by the client. So what Trevor is saying is, because of the 50-year history in Australia of accountancy firms basically concentrating on the delivery of taxation advice, taxation services, many SMEs don't expect accountants to be offering a variety of that, not to be offering advisory services. So the concept is that you have to sell those advisory services. And part of that, of course, is the preparation, getting ready to be able to offer those services. Trevor doesn't think we're doing a good job at selling. And his example he gave was, he spoke to an accountant recently who also happened to be a client of ESS BIZTOOLS. And he said that he was going through a client's cash transactions and he noticed that he was paying $3,000 per month to an organisation. So when he had the meeting with the client, he said to him, and what's the $3,000 per month you're paying to so-and-so? And he said that the client sat back and had a big smile on his face and he said, oh, I've got a coach. And the accountant said, you've got a coach? Okay. What's the coach doing? Oh, he's taken me through all sorts of things. We're discussing matters. We're looking at our key performance indicators and he's looking at what our future planning activities are. So the accountant let him talk for a while and then he said, you know, Jim, we could have provided those services. And he said that the client looked at him and said, but you never told me you could supply those services. I never knew you could supply those services. I've been your client for 20 years. You've seen my business growing. You know, we've had some challenges at various times, but we're a lot bigger now than what we were 20 years ago. You've helped me with my superannuation fund. You've helped me with our annual accounts and meeting our taxation obligations. I've got no complaint. In fact, I class you as an outstanding accountant. But not on any occasion have you said to me that I could benefit from your knowledge on commercial business matters. You've never discussed them with me. The accountant said to Trevor Marchant, I had to sit back and think. And I said, okay, my apologies. What Marchant said out of this is, this client, who'd been a client of that firm for 20 years, was paying $36,000 per annum to a business coach. And when the accountant analysed it, he realised that virtually everything that was being discussed, he could have provided those services. And he also indicated that virtually all that information was available from within ESS BIZTOOLS that he was a subscriber to. So we need to sit and think about the services that are being provided. So help people what they want was another key comment. Nothing happens unless something is sold, Trevor Marchant said. If there's not a problem, there's probably nothing to be sold. You know, businesses create things and then the problem is, well, we've now got to sell them because we've outlaid our funds to develop that. Trevor finished his comments by saying, the highest paid profession is also the lowest paid profession, and that's for sales. Please think about it. If you need any further information, please contact us at ESS BIZTOOLS, www.essbiztools.com.au, or you can send me an email, peter@essbiztools.com.au. Have a great day. Goodbye.